This is the recorded version of the lesson for December the 4th, 2020. Our learning standard is 6L 1.1. Summarize the basic structures and functions of flowering plants required for survival, reproduction, and defense. So, quite simply, give us the basic facts about the parts of the plant, what they do, focusing specifically on areas of survival, reproduction, and defense. Today, primarily we're focusing on reproduction, and that involves pollination. We've got a BrainPOP on pollination, a Flocabulary on pollination, and a Gizmo on pollination. This week's Achieve 3000. What are these plants? Maybe not. And we have our assessment coming up for this standard on the 8th. Just a reminder that it's Friday, so that means you've got some Achieve 3000s closing, so make sure that you get those turned in. This week's closes next Friday at midnight. Heading over to Canvas, here we are on the main page for the science class, and clicking on the 6L 1.1 takes you over here, and here is December the 4th. We've got our BrainPOP on pollination. We've got our Flocabulary on pollination. Don't forget, when you do the Flocabulary, you must do the read and respond. You can complete the quiz after you complete the read and respond, and I'll take the higher of the two scores. Make sure you're following the directions on screenshot for Flocabulary, also for BrainPOP. Let's look at the Gizmo. So here's your worksheet on the Gizmo. Let's head on over to Clever. I'm going to press the Clever button there on my Chrome browser, and go ahead and get the Gizmos open. There's the Gizmos. So here we are. The Gizmos has launched, and we have our virtual worksheet. Of course, if we were face to face, you would have the worksheet there in front of you so that the Gizmo could be the main thing on your screen. So some prior knowledge questions. It asks, how do insects help a plant reproduce? Well, they carry the pollen from one flower to another. They are lighting on top of a flower. Maybe there's some nectar. They get some pollen on their little footsie, and then they transfer it over. Oranges, apples, and watermelons are examples of fruits. How are they alike? Well, they have an outer skin, a fleshy interior, and seeds are in the center. Based on question number 2, you think a pumpkin's a fruit? How about broccoli? Well, based on the scientific definition, a pumpkin would be a fruit. And of course, broccoli, we're eating those stalks and leaves, so that's going to be a vegetable, isn't it? So warming up with our Gizmo, says pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the male part to the female part. And so on the pollination tab, check on self-pollination. How many flowers do you see? Well, I see one. Now let's check on the tab for cross-pollination. How many flowers do you see? So if you know nothing about those, what do you think is going to be the difference? Self-pollination is kind of like self-serve. Like if you're at a restaurant and you serve yourself back in the days before the pandemic. And then cross-pollination, well, you're going to have two things cross. So you're going to need to have 2 flowers. Let's look at activity number A. There's no numbers in A. So first one says go back to pollination, click on self-pollination, start over. How are self-pollination and cross-pollination the same, and how are they different? So it says follow the directions here to observe the steps of self-pollination, and in your own words, describe what happens. So you go over here, We get back to this, start over. It says use your mouse to move the pollen grains from one of the anthers to the stigma. Pollen grains stick to the stigma. Click on the style to watch the pollen grains go down the tube to the ovules. Drag several sperm cells from the pollen tubes to the ovules. After the ovules have been fertilized, the petals will fall off. Click on the petals. There's a fruit. There's the sepal. Fertilized ovules become seeds. The ovary grows into a fruit to surround and protect the seeds. Seeds are spread when the fruit is eaten, digested, and eliminated by animals. So explain that here. Number 2 says, read the description of that last step very carefully. Why do you think plants surround seeds with yummy fruit? Now it says, go to start over and do cross-pollination. Follow the directions to observe the steps and tell how they're different. So start over. Cross-pollination. Move your mouse to move some of the pollen grain from the anther of the left flower to the stigma of the right. Pollen grains stick to the stigma. Click on the style to watch the growth. You're going to drag those sperm cells. After the ovules have been fertilized, the sperm cells, by the first cell, the petals fall off. Fertilized ovules become seeds. The ovary grows into a fruit to surround and protect the seeds. The seeds are spread when the fruit is eaten, digested, and eliminated by animals. So think about how they're different there for number 3. Number 4, in cross-pollination, pollen grains must get from one flower to another. What are some ways that could happen? Discuss that. Obviously, since this is not a live version, you'll just have to brainstorm it on your own. Flower parts and pollination. Select the Identification tab. Your goal here is to identify parts of the flower and describe their function. So complete the diagram. Drag the 10 items back to the blanks in the diagram. When the diagram is complete, click on the camera and then paste that here. So if you were done, you click this and you're going to right click to copy it. You're going to paste it right here. And of course, I didn't finish, obviously. So use these to tell you about the different parts. How about the anther atop the tall filament make it more likely that plants will be pollinated? In some plants, the pistils don't form until a few days after the stamens do. How might this keep a plant from self-pollinating? So that's the gizmos. Don't forget, we have the BrainPOP on pollination and then also the Flocabulary.